Our rights and freedom are being stolen from under our noses by an unholy alliance of corrupt MPs and transnational corporations. This week, an overwhelming and utterly sickening majority of MPs in the UK nodded through legislation that gives the state the right to kick down your doors in pursuit of fulfilment of the suicide note that is net zero. There, in plain type, is the determination to jail those who would light a stove to warm their children for twice as long as a thug who attacks a woman in the street. Are you not entertained? Joining me to discuss the emergent situation here and elsewhere is academic and thinker Ralph Schollhammer. Ralph, thank you for joining me.
Neil, great to be back.
Great to see you there. We're talking about, the moves that people are making, the Farmers' Party in the Netherlands to push back against authoritarianism and the land grab. I'm particularly interested, though, that what I consider an abomination by British MPs this week. I understand something similar has been unfolding, for example, in Germany when it comes to, this application of control over people's lives.
Would you allow me to connect our conversation a little bit to the conversation that you had with John before? Because I think this is such an important point. Everything he was saying, and we should look at this more, happens mostly in energy poor societies. We tend to forget this. Energy is the great liberator. It's often forgotten, but the steam engine was the thing that drove the final nail through slavery. And if we pursue a path, as we do in Europe, from Great Britain to continental Europe, that will lead to energy poverty, it will be followed by a reduction in liberty. And as you just said, they will use fancy terms, right? They will not call it rationing. They will call it demand management. They will call it, shifting it to the peak. There will all be these fancy terms. But ultimately, we have ventured onto a path of energy poverty. And at the end of this path can only be, in the worst case, misery or revolution. And I think politicians need to become aware of this.
Kerry, that is fascinating, isn't it? That it's energy that has elevated the human species to where we have been for a relatively brief moment in time. And if we lose that access to energy, we'll be back where we were, which opens the door to abuse.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think a lot of Ralph's writing on the absolute horrific way in which modernity and civilization and industrialization, all the things that have made life good, that have keep us alive longer than ever, have been vilified, and it is quite terrifying. But I wonder on what some of your theses, Ralph, and I'm excited by the pushback in Holland with the citizens. Is it called the Citizens Farmers Movement? Led by
Farmers and Citizens Movement.
Yeah. Farmer Citizen Movement. Yeah. And I'm saddened by the lack of a kind of pushback in Ireland. But I'm wondering, do we actually need to go further in the sense that arguing for a pushback against this kind of green austerity and impoverishment that we face and anti-humanism that we face is one thing. The EU Green New Deal, ULEZ, the bill this week and kicking people's doors in to turn off a boiler and lunatic stuff. But do we need to go further in questioning the underlying premise that climate change is a massive problem? Now, I'm not a climate change denier. I do think there's an anthropogenic effect, a man-made effect, very likely real, not a problem with that. But how big is it really a problem? Aren't we better off developing and going ahead with adaptation and modernity and questioning the very underlying problem that all this crap is being...
Over to you, Ralph. Over to you, Ralph. Don't we need more energy, regardless of what's happening and who's to blame? We need more energy and not less.
Yeah, the thing I always say is the climate crisis will be solved by ingenuity, by technology, by the human spirit, if you want. But in order for that to unfold, we need energy. I think this idea, and this is where the quasi-religious component comes in. We think if we get poor, then the climate problem will solve itself. But why? First of all, if Europe gets poor, nobody in the world is better off. It only means that Africa will have nobody to trade with and they will remain poor, which is something that they most likely won't want to be. So, and the second part is, it's not so much the pushback against the agenda. We also, I think, need a positive message. And we know we have the technological means, for example, to guarantee to every British citizen that their energy bill per month might be slightly higher than their phone bill or the internet bill, and still we could reduce CO2 emissions if we do nuclear and some other of these very promising things.
Ralph, is this the reality, though? This attitude, as evidenced by the MPs in the British Parliament, is this the reality of the public-private partnership, stakeholder capitalism, where the decision-making is taken out of our hands and becomes an unholy alliance between politicians and their corporate masters?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I said that the corporate masters, I always think that corporations simply go where I think the market is, right? We saw this a little bit in a different area with Budweiser and Dill Mulvaney, when all of a sudden the white working class beer brand thinks that they need a transgender person in order to promote their brand, and it completely backfires. But I think we need to kind of free ourselves from the grip of these anti-humanist, pessimistic neo-Malthusians who think that ultimately the only solution is fewer and purer people. My big thing is, and this is why I love so much to talk to the two of you and to your audience, when push came to shove, the British people usually stood on the right side of history, and I expect them to do this again. And kind of do this was, I think, what many people were hoping for from Brexit, that it will be a realignment with reality. We do not have to be poor to solve the energy crisis. We do not have to get poor to solve the climate crisis. We can do all of it at once. It takes some optimism, but I can tell you, if you talk from people with people from the industry, they will tell you the same thing. But then we do other things, just real quick. We make permitting processes take forever, right? We make regulations, they choke off the things that we could do. So we kind of shoot ourselves in our foot, and then we complain about a limp. And this is not how it works.
I'm running out of time, but I'm absolutely loving and will take away the idea of a realignment with reality, and I will hope that you will stand alongside us as we realign with reality. Thank you for joining me this evening.